quarterback whom they traded up for in the draft and not to put up gaudy passing statistics. And every time I look at Aaron Rodgers in my rankings, I'm like, maybe I should put him lower. And I know I'm lower than him on him than consensus. I think I have him quarterback 16 right now. And he's not a quarterback that I'm targeting whatsoever in fantasy in 2020.
All right, let's stay in the NFC North, because I think among the people who are really into this, the quote-unquote experts, the analysts, Matthew Stafford is probably the favorite late-round quarterback among the industry right now. I think that's going to cause his ADP to eventually rise. But for now, it's at 156.3, the QB 13. I mean, he was absolutely absurd before the injury last year. We talked about it some. You can go to Pat Thorman's article about FFPC best ball values. He highlighted Matthew Stafford's pace last year, which would have been the quarterback 2 behind only Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's how hot Matthew Stafford was before his injury in midseason. Obviously, at 156.3, Matthew Stafford is a value. At what point would you consider Matthew Stafford not to be a value? Because, man, I think it's going to rise pretty sharply. And I guess the other question is he your favorite late-round quarterback right now if he sticks at 156.3?
Well, I worry about the back injury, and it's a recurring back injury, and not that he's not someone that, like in best ball, where if you lose your quarterback, you lose your quarterback, and you can't just pick up another quarterback after you probably drafted 2, and you're down to 1 quarterback, and you can encounter like bye week issues, or God forbid if that quarterback gets injured for a week or 2, like you're out of it. Mm-hmm. You're taking zeros at the quarterback position where you usually get 20 plus a week, and you can't afford that. So some of these quarterbacks, these late round quarterbacks, I think you should approach with more caution in best ball leagues. And I think that Matthew Stafford is one of them. I think that Ben Roethlisberger is also one of them. But from a season-long redraft standpoint where, hey, if the guy goes down, you could just drop him and pick up somebody off the waiver wire who's probably going to give you, decent production, and you can figure it out. You can stream at quarterback. I think Matthew Stafford is a great, great pick. As you mentioned, through 8 weeks last season, first of all, the Lions were a lot better than people remember. They were 3-4-1 through 8 games. They had a 1-point loss to Kansas City. A 4-point loss to Kansas City and a 1-point loss to Green Bay. They were averaging 25.5 points per game, which would have ranked 8th in the NFL. 391 yards from scrimmage per game. That would have ranked 4th in the NFL. Stafford on pace for 38 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. This was all under first-year offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell, and I really like the way that he designed the Lions' offense. They really tried to capitalize. Stafford's ADOT and his yards per attempt had really suffered in the previous seasons under Jim Bob Cooter and the offensive coordinators that they were trotting out before that. Under Darrell Bevell, his ADOT shot up to 11.4, which was the highest in the league. He also led the league in percentage of passes delivered 20-plus yards downfield. Almost 20% of his passes were thrown 20 or more yards downfield. That does not include rack. That is just pass like air yard passes of 20 yards or more. So, and I think that Darrell Bevell just really did a good job of capitalizing on his strengths and on the strengths of the supporting cast of the Lions. And the Lions, if you want to bet on continuity this year, they're bringing back their top 3 receivers. They're bringing back their second year tight end, who I still think is going to be a stud, in TJ Hawkins. They're bringing back their quarterback. They're bringing back their OC. They're bringing back their HC. The only real turnover is at running back, and who cares? You can hit the ground running at running back, and 3 of 5 offensive line starters. So Matthew Stafford is in a good position to crush his ADP, to have one of the best seasons of his career, and the big hurdle is going to be that concern over his back.
Yeah. And also DeAndre Swift plays very, very well in the pass game too. I think it sets up well. One thing you can check out in the draft kit, I did an article about position allocation in best ball. And if you end up, like, one way I like to take Stafford in best ball would if you take 3. And the way you take 3, and we went back and back tested this and did a bunch of math. And the way you take 3, you can't take a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or even tier 4 quarterback. If you want to take 3 quarterbacks on your best ball, team, you take 3 late round, like 3 of the guys we're talking about today. So maybe, it's Ryan, Stafford, and Ben or something like that. So that if one of them goes down, you have 2. If one of them underperforms, you have 2. And the math kind of backs that up. If you end up taking a Mahomes or Deshaun or Russ, you almost should always end up with just 2 quarterbacks, assuming 20-round best ball drafts, which they aren't all that. But anyways, you can read the article to more on that for how you should be aligning positions in best ball. Okay, I do want to mention Daniel Jones. Even though we spent a lot of time on Daniel Jones already, we can talk about him quickly. We've talked about the schedule concerns. It's certainly a concern. It lightens up after the first month or so. My point with Daniel Jones is just kind of similar to the point I had on Tyler Higbee, where you don't see rookie quarterbacks very often put up 4 30-point DraftKings games in 12 starts. Like, it just doesn't happen that often. And Daniel Jones was able to do that. I mean, just flashing an absolutely huge ceiling, I think, with Evan Ingram healthy. And that was without all his guys healthy. Like, Barkley was on high ankle sprain. Evan Ingram was hurt at times. Golden Tate, Sterling Shep, they were all hurt at various times. They actually have pretty good weapons. So I understand the schedule concerns. Daniel Jones showed me a ceiling we don't often see from rookie quarterbacks, has plenty of rushing equity. So I still really like Daniel Jones if you can avoid him for that first part of his schedule, which we mentioned previously. So his ADP is currently 161.6, QB 14 in FFPC. I think he can certainly provide a profit on that, and one of my favorite late round quarterback targets. Anything we haven't said about Daniel Jones, Evan, you want to mention?
Yeah, just reiterating that schedule, that early schedule. The Giants face the Steelers in week 1. They go to Soldier Field in week 2, and then week 3 they are at home against the 49ers. I think it loosens up after that pretty considerably. At the Rams, no Wade Phillips. Their defense lost a ton of talent in the offseason. I think that Daniel Jones might end up on a lot of waiver wires after week 3. And then this will be the time to pick him up at Dallas, probably playing indoors and in a likely shootout, and then going back home against the Redskins. I'm not really afraid of the Redskins. I know they have some talent in their front 7, but I still think they can give up big games to opposing quarterbacks. And I really, really still love him as a best ball pick because, just the fact that he might start off a little bit slow. It's not going to hurt you as much. Maybe look for a later round quarterback to pair with him who does have a favorable schedule to be your quarterback too. But I think that this schedule thing is going to ultimately push Daniel Jones down in terms of ADP into a spot where he can become like a smashing value because I think the upside is still there. He is really athletic. He can absolutely add production with his legs. The Jason Garrett thing, still sticks in the back of my mind. It's something that I don't like for him. But he's got a lot of weaponry. Their offensive line is better, and the way that he plays is conducive to scoring a lot of fantasy points. And we did see big time flashes of that last year.
For sure. Okay, I want to talk about Baker Mayfield because we have not spent a lot of time on Baker Mayfield so far this offseason. Currently, the QB 15, 172.5 ADP. The thing about Baker, man, I mean, like, as you mentioned, he was like a tier 2, tier 3 quarterback last year. People were taking him very, very high. Has an awful sophomore year. We can maybe chalk a lot of that up to coaching. I mean, there were some egregious coaching decisions from the Browns. And I think the concern this year is that they're going to be, under Kevin Stefanski, extremely 12 set heavy with Austin Hooper and David Njoku. That Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry are both coming off of surgeries, that they're going to play run heavy with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, that they're going to play extremely slow, and it's going to be tough for Baker to find a ceiling. And so I get all those concerns. I still think that there's a lot of talent here. I mean, this offense is extremely talented. There's a lot of talent here, enough for Baker to find a ceiling. I'm concerned with some of the stuff, with the way they're going to play to some degree. In general. But anyways, we haven't talked a lot about the Browns pass game this offseason at all. I'm curious just to get your general take.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be a smash mouth balanced team, balanced in terms of run pass ratio. And, they're going to run a lot of 2 and maybe even 3 tight end sets with Austin Hooper, David Njoku, and Harrison Bryant, who was the Mackey Award winner this past year in college football. They stole him in the 4th round. They traded for a fullback, Andy Janovich. They gave Kareem Hunt a 2nd-round tender. Probably could have kept him on the original round tender, but they gave him a 2nd-round tender. They signed Jack Conklin. You know, they you look at Kevin Stefanski's history, what he did in Minnesota last year, and I think Baker's going to be a lot more efficient. And I don't know about him breaking out from, in terms of having a really big statistical season. Mm-hmm. I'm sort of on the fence with him. I don't have a really strong lean in either direction. I do think he's going to be more efficient, but I don't think this is going to be a high volume throw ball offense.
Right. Exactly. So, we'll see on Baker. I don't think the scheme, as Evan said, is set up for him to absolutely smash. And so some of these guys have much better chances to do so. Speaking of scheme, I want to mention Jared Goff. There are some people, and I may have been one of them, unfortunately, and I'm mostly just joking, who have called Sean McVay a fake sharp, right? Everybody thought that Sean McVay was like the sharpest dude in the entire NFL. Last season, I mean, you've mentioned how teams figured out his 11 personnel offense, how teams figured out what they were doing, were able to stop it a lot. I mean, they have made some very, very questionable personnel moves, contractual moves. They spent a second-round pick in back-to-back years at the running back position. They have massive offensive line problems. I think Jared Goff, people would say he's a system quarterback. The system better be working. And now they lose Brandon Cooks. They're going to replace him with Josh Reynolds, who I think is just meh, and Van Jefferson, who I know the prospect community was kind of down on. So Jared Goff is currently QB 16, 203.8. I would certainly would prefer Daniel Jones, probably would prefer Ben Roethlisberger. And then we'll talk about some other guys later, like Teddy Bridgewater, and maybe some of those guys even further down who I think I might prefer to Jared Goff. You did have Jared Goff in the tail end of your top 150, though, so it sounds like you might be a little bit higher on him than I am.
Yeah, I think he's right at quarterback 15, and I think he might actually be the number 150 overall player or something, somewhere real close to that. Yeah, I really like his weapons. I mean, from wide receiver 1 through wide receiver 4, I think they've got 4 legit NFL players. That's obviously Cooper Kupp. I think he's a difference maker in the slot. Robert Woods, I think he's a borderline difference maker as, the best rushing wide receiver in the NFL and also one of the best route running receivers in the NFL. Josh Reynolds, I think, can fill that Brandon Cooks role. I mean, Brandon Cooks over his previous 16 games had like 640 receiving yards. I think that Josh Reynolds can do that. And then Van Jefferson is a guy that they think that can play all 3 receiver positions. I think might replace Cooper Kupp if he leaves in free agency. They have not given Cooper Kupp an extension yet, and then or Robert Woods. So I like their receiver core, and then their tight end core. I mean, they've got Higbee and Everett, and Everett was playing ahead of Higbee and playing pretty well for most of last season. Higbee comes in, just tears the absolute cover off over the last 5 games. They've got depth, I think, at running back. What really torpedoed Jared Goff's season last year, and he was an efficient player in 2017 and 2018, and the bottom fell out really last year for him because their pass protection waned so much. I mean, they took a really big step back in terms of pass protection. They did have a couple of rookies that stepped up and played for them last season, but it's going to be another year of offensive line turnover for them. And I think there are legit questions on their offensive line. And Jared Goff is just he's really, really sensitive to pressure. But, he still turned in big games. Like when you could get him in a good spot, when he'd be at home against a team that could not rush the passer, it was like, we're playing him in DFS this week. Mm-hmm. And, he would hit more often than not. Yeah. So I don't know. He's almost like a quarterback that I'm cool with streaming in season long, but and I mean I'm cool with taking him in best ball. I don't know. I have him priced at quarterback 15, and I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, TD rate for Jared Goff last year was only 3.5%. I mean, that's really, really low. He was at 5.7% in 2018, 5.9% in 2017. If he can even get back up to 4.5%, I think he'll be fine. But yeah, I think losing Brandon Cooks, even though his production wasn't there, it still takes something away from the offense for sure. And they're changing a lot. I expect them to play a lot with Higbee and Everett on the field at the same time. All right, let's move to some of these really later round options. We're going to skip over Ben Roethlisberger and Burrow and Drew Lock. We've spent enough time on them already. Let's go to Teddy Bridgewater, 279.1 QB 21. I mean, I know Evan is excited about the way Carolina's offense sets up this year. If you like Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel and Ian Thomas, you should like Teddy Bridgewater. What we saw last year from Teddy Bridgewater in New Orleans when he got spot starts was